Hey everybody, this is the third PowerPoint for Unit 2, the judicial branch, the last branch we've not yet covered in the federal government. So we're going to go ahead and just jump on in here. Primary goal of the federal courts is equal justice for all, right? To treat everyone the same under the law. This is the goal. It's you guys are aware of everything going on in the world. This goal is hard to accomplish. There's always going to be prejudice out there, unequal wealth, inequalities within the law, right? But this is the goal of the court system, right? Other courts coexist within the federal courts. These are the 50 state court systems, right? And then within those states, there are local courts, right? But today we're just talking about the federal court system, right? Federal judges serve for life. They are appointed by the president. The point of serving for life is to remove them from popular and political pressure. This kind of gives each president a lasting legacy, especially depending on how many federal judges they have appointed in their administration. All right, so real quick, just a poll. Do you believe federal judges should be appointed for life, yes or no? Just answer that real quick, and then we'll jump on to the next one, because that's not the case for every single judge out there in the United States. We'll talk about that later, though. So jurisdiction, real quick. We need to talk about what jurisdiction means and the different kinds of jurisdiction. So jurisdiction is a court's authority to hear and decide a case, and there are multiple kinds of jurisdiction. All right, exclusive jurisdiction means that only the federal court system can hear and decide the case. Concurrent jurisdiction means a case can be heard in either state or federal courts. And then we got original jurisdiction, which just means the authority to hear a case for the first time. So that could be federal court original jurisdiction. That could be state court original jurisdiction, whatever. And then you've got appellate jurisdiction, the authority to review a case appealed from a lower court. We'll talk about courts of appeal in a little bit. So what kind of cases do federal courts hear? They hear cases where the U.S. is a party. What that means is that if someone is suing the government, that will go straight to federal court. All right. They also hear cases involving violations of the Constitution or federal law. So if someone claims that their Fourth Amendment rights have been infringed upon, that would go to a federal court. All right. Crimes that are committed on federal land, whether they be national parks, monuments, whatever. You got bankruptcy, copyright, patent, and maritime law cases, and then you've got cases based on state law where the opposing parties are from different states. So if someone from North Carolina sues somebody in Oklahoma, that would be heard in a federal court, so that it's not heard in a state court, because if it's heard in a state court, whichever state it's in, they might be more likely to side with the person from that state. Okay? So what decisions are made by each of the lower federal courts? So you've got U.S. district courts. All right, these determine guilt or innocence. Then you've got the courts of appeal. They can do three things. They can do one of three things. They can overturn the case, which reverses the lower court's decision. They can uphold a case, which keeps the lower court's decision, or they can remand it, which basically means they demand that a new trial be held. All right, and real quick, let me go back here. These are the different levels of the federal court system. At the tippy top, you got the Supreme Court, then you've got courts of appeal, and then you've got federal district courts. All right. So what other court officials help the judges do their job? You've got magistrates. Magistrates are judges who do routine work like issue warrants and bail. They hear preliminary evidence. So we talked about the writs of habeas corpus the other day. Right, whenever you're put in front of a judge to be told what crime you're being charged with, a magistrate would be that judge. You've got U.S. attorneys. These are lawyers that work on behalf of the government, and they prosecute cases. These will also be known as prosecutors, U.S. prosecutors. Then you've got U.S. marshals. These are the people who make arrests on behalf of the federal government and issue subpoenas, which are documents that say you are ordered to appear in court. All right. So going specifically into the Supreme Court, Supreme Court has original jurisdiction in the following cases. Cases involving U.S. diplomats from other countries in dispute between the states. Supreme Court only hears about 75 to 100 cases a year, and they get a lot of requests, so they have to turn down a lot of cases. Types of cases normally that they choose to normally hear involve ones that have a constitutional question. We'll jump more into this later on in Unit 4. But ones where someone claims that a right guaranteed to them in the Constitution has been denied them. One that involves a literal conflict between two parties, something that involves a legal rather than a political question, so something dealing with law, and issues that affect the entire country. All right, what does a decision by the Supreme Court mean? It means that they determine the meaning of law, which is hugely important. Judicial review is a vocabulary term for this unit, and the reason why is because it's an incredibly, incredibly important term for you to understand. Judicial review refers to the power of the Supreme Court to review any federal, state, or local law to see if it is constitutional. So the courts have the ultimate say-so whether or not a law is actually constitutional and legal. All right, the very first case that established that was the Supreme Court case of Marbury versus Madison. We'll go into more detail with that in Unit 4. Just know that it established the principle of judicial review. All right, here's just a little video that goes more into detail on that. Make sure you watch that real quick. There are 3 principles of judicial review. Constitution is the supreme law of the land. That's the supremacy clause we talked about back in Unit 1. If any law conflicts with the Constitution rules. It's the duty of the judicial branch to uphold the Constitution. Those are the 3 key principles of judicial review. All right, important term for you to understand, precedent. I've used this term, especially talking about the executive branch. It sounds similar to president, like the president of the United States, but precedent is basically something that it's an example, right? So the Supreme Court decisions become the example to follow in future cases. They set a precedent. All right, what limits exist on the power of the Supreme Court? It depends on the executive branch to enforce the decisions. Perhaps one of the more infamous Supreme Court cases in U.S. history is Worcester versus Georgia, in which the Supreme Court made a decision, and President Andrew Jackson refused to support their decision. It's not necessarily important that we get into that right now. You'll talk more about Worcester versus Georgia next year in American History 1. Just know that that's an example of the executive branch refusing to enforce the court's decision. Lastly, Congress can only get around Supreme Court decisions by amending the Constitution or by changing laws to fit the Constitution. Right? Remember, judicial review gives the court the ultimate say-so in what is legal or what is constitutional. But Congress can ultimately propose amendments to the Constitution or change laws, because they're the lawmaking body to begin with. All right, written opinions. In Supreme Court cases, there are different opinions that are written. Each side's given a chance to present their argument to the court, and then the court will make a decision. If the court rules, say, 9-0 in favor of one side, one of the 9 Supreme Court justices will present views of the justices on the case, right? So majority opinion, that would be a unanimous opinion, actually. Concurring opinion is another justice who agrees with the decision, but maybe they agree with the decision for a different reason. A dissenting opinion is a justice or justices, it can be multiple justices, who oppose the decision. And then a unanimous opinion is if all justices vote the same way. So I kind of got it mixed up a little bit earlier. That's my fault. A majority opinion would actually be, if, like, say, there was a case and it was a 7-2 decision, right? The majority would, be the 7. The 2 would be the dissenting opinion there. Unanimous, it says all 9 justices vote the same way. All right, what affects the decision of the Supreme Court? The law. The law does. Stare decisis means, following previous decisions made by courts. That's precedent. right? It's a big deal if the Supreme Court rules in a case that overturns a previous Supreme Court ruling. So we'll use the controversial topic of abortion. In 1972, the Supreme Court ruled in the case Roe versus Wade that women had the right to a safe abortion procedure. If that were to get overturned today, that would be a big deal because that would be the Supreme Court going against a previous Supreme Court ruling. That's what that means. You know, there's a lot of changing social conditions, right? Here are three important Supreme Court cases that, like I said, we'll get more into in the next unit. But these are three important Supreme Court cases where social conditions changed drastically. All right, so Plessy versus Ferguson. This determined that segregation was legal. This established the separate but equal doctrine. So this said that segregation is legal in that you can separate the races, but they can still be equal, right? Which is, of course, absurd because separate is inherently unequal. And Brown versus Board of Education, which nearly 60 years later said that exact same thing. It overturned that court decision and said that segregation is inherently unequal. You cannot separate people based on their race and claim that that's treating them equally. The most recent example is Obergefell versus Hodges, which states that same-sex couples absolutely have the right to marry according to the Due Process Clause and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, right? That was a big deal because that was only 5 years ago, and that made same-sex marriage legal in the entire country. All right. So these are just some examples of powers that the federal courts have, specifically the Supreme Court, requirements, so on and so forth. So make sure you complete the quiz on the next slide, and have a good day.